3, Westminster, Rockingham, and Brookline.
John O'Brien, Royalton and Tunbridge.
Heather Supernaut, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
All right. We've got two other committee members who will be joining us momentarily, and Sidonia, our committee assistant. We have one other visitor in the room, and I think that's the lay of the land here. And
Okay.
we asked Erica to come and speak on the report that the legislature received from the, I'm going to forget the full name, Erica. Help me out here.
It's the Animal Cruelty Investigation Advisory Board.
Okay, this is a report that the legislature gets every year. There is some information in this year's report, if you had a chance to look at it, that refers back to legislation that we passed last year. So I'm going to let Erica take it from here, but she'll maybe just quickly review that, the history of that legislation. And I know a lot of the report is devoted to talking about that.
What bill was that?
Animal welfare. So we'll turn it over to you, Erica.
Okay, great, thank you. In our report that we do submit every January, we touched on in this year that the ACIAB was created by the legislature for the purpose of reviewing Vermont's existing systems for investigating and responding to animal cruelty. So over the years, as this board has met and we have tackled the various points that we were charged with researching and taking information on and coming up with a plan, year after year, all our reports really do address that we need a comprehensive plan. We cannot just go one bullet at a time to address the problems. You know, it's great that you guys, so many of you are from so many different parts of the state. And every part of our state has been touched by some, at least one, and in many cases, many cases of animal cruelty. And it's fragmented. We have the 251 Club for our communities. There's 251 different ways to handle a cruelty complaint. And that's not fair for the humans in our society or the animals who are suffering. So we have been proposing a creation of an animal welfare division, which the last legislation did take that piece out of the bill and create that and pass that in Act 167. We provided information and guidance on the other parts that really need to be addressed, which is licensing or at least registering shelters and rescues in the state and holding them to some standards for the care of our animals. And also to address the transportation of animals into our state. I think some of you representatives in the southern part of the state probably hear about that more from your constituents than others because so many are brought into some of the, local rest areas in Brattleboro and Windham where animals are being picked up out of tractor trailer trucks. So, we provided some guidelines and information for that, and working with the Vermont Humane Federation and other animal welfare advocates around the state, as well as the members of the advisory board, produced the legislation H626. And I do just want to point out, if you haven't seen the list of who is on the ACIAB, when the legislature created this board in 2015, really comprehensive, people appointed. So you have 2 representatives from animal sheltering, animal welfare organizations like myself. I'm from Central Vermont Humane Society. We have Sally Adams from the State's Attorney and Sheriff's Association. John McCallum is from the Department of Public Safety. Mike Scott, Department of Fish and Wildlife. Trevor Whipple represents the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Jennifer Furpo is from the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council. Mary McFawn represents the Vermont Federation of Dog Clubs. Pamela Brown, Dr. Brown is a veterinarian representing all Vermont veterinarians. Kelly Price is with the Vermont Police Association. Joanne Nichols is from the Humane Society of Chittenden County. And then we are, I'm sure most of you know Dr. Kristen Haas, who represented the state Agency of Agriculture as the state veterinarian. And so Emily Buskey is going to be taking over her role as far as we know. So as you can see, we have folks from all aspects of agencies throughout the state that work with animals in the state on a variety of levels for animal welfare. So we've had a wide range of opinions and experiences, and that really helped to create such a comprehensive piece of legislation. So we will be looking forward to working with the new director. You mentioned that at the beginning, the director, there's been no formal announcement. What I know is that the job was offered to an amazing candidate. There were a number of really good applicants for that role. And so they're going through the painstaking, slow process of getting somebody through the HR background checks and all of that. But as far as I know, according to Deputy Commissioner Dan Batesy, that's moving along as it should. So we're hopeful for that announcement soon. And then as Act 167 dictates, the new director will have 8 months to compile a report to the legislature regarding how to move forward with what needs to be done to establish and run this new division. And so the ACIAB, all of us on the board are willing and able to continue our work and coordinate with the director, and look forward to helping to get some new legislation presented so that we can cover some of those vital components that weren't able to be passed out of 626. Sorry, I know that was a really long-winded summary.
No, that's, thank you. Did the legislation that we passed last session spell out a role, an ongoing role for the board once the new director's in place and begins that work?
So the original legislation, not what was passed, but the original legislation talked about creating an advisory council. And that council would very much mirror what the ACIAB is in terms of the seats and the expertise that's brought to that council. And there's also been recommendations to bring on folks from like children's services and domestic violence situation organizations and mental health organizations, because those are often components involved with animal cruelty. So I think it looks like a pretty large council in that recommendation, but that wasn't part of what was passed. So the ACIAB is, like I said, there's nothing that said we were disbanded as soon as this director is in place. So we feel that we are still under an obligation to report to the legislature as requested. And we will continue to do that as best that we can.
Would you mind just going through the list of current board members, just so that we have a sense of who they are? Do you have that available?
Of the ACIAB?
Yes.
So those were the folks I listed just a few moments ago.
Oh, you went through the, okay, gotcha. Okay, good.
Yeah, that was our board.
Great. Let's see, questions from committee members. Representative Bosler.
You mentioned that somebody was offered the position of animal welfare officer. Do you know how soon it'll be till that person is actually in office and doing the work?
I don't, Dan Batesy said it's moving forward, and so everything is on track, for them to, be seated. We had originally hoped it would be in a January, February timeframe. But of course, like the job, application and interview process, that was all happening over the holidays, which stretched things out. So now it's just finalizing what the state requires to place somebody in a position of that level. I'm not involved in that. I was asked to participate in the interviews, but I am not a state employee. So it would be the Department of Public Safety that will be finalizing the hiring.
Is there anything else in the report that you wanted to highlight, Erica?
I think I touched on all of it, other than, to know that, I mean, I know it's a tough time for our legislature, and I think that there are a lot of really important priorities that you folks are focusing on, this session and into the next. And, we know, financially, that it is a roadblock, to talk about funding a new division. But, one of the things I like to point out to folks is that we're not creating new animal cruelty investigations by creating a new board, a division to handle them. What we're trying to do is to consolidate the investigations that are already happening into a more cohesive and consistent form. And it actually could have a great number of efficiencies, and in the long run, save the state money. So as we move forward in writing new legislation, I expect to hope to be invited back to all the various committees that will work on it, and hope that we can all work together to get something in place to really help out. Because our law enforcement officers, primarily Fish and Wildlife, game wardens, but also various police departments in the towns throughout the state, are really, really struggling to handle the number of calls and complaints that they get. And we know that when the human citizens of our state are struggling and suffering, the animals suffer right along with them. And so they don't have a voice. We need to be their voice and make sure that we're helping them.
Representative O'Brien.
Speaking of tough times, Erica, just at the municipal level, I'm on the select board in Tunbridge. We're having the hardest time filling a lot of these municipal positions, like animal control officer, pound keeper, constable. I mean, to the point where we're going to do away with constables this year. But that was sort of the boots on the ground officials who dealt with a lot of these animal cruelty cases. And I just wondered if the advisory board, has been having discussions whether, like, what those people used to do to somehow professionalize this and have it more at a state level.
Absolutely. So there was actually earlier legislation that did change the definition of humane agent. And partly it was because there were a number of cases of animal control officers or even health officers of municipalities who were in, their heart's in the right place and they're trying to help and do this, but they're not actually trained to investigate violations of our state statutes. And so people's rights were being trumped on, or just evidence was not gathered appropriately. And so there was a large level of frustration from our state's attorneys that as cases were brought to them, they weren't cases that could be pursued and tried. And then that just increased everybody's sort of mistrust of the whole process. So, we believe very strongly that if a violation of a state statute is occurring, that belongs with law enforcement. And so if your town doesn't have their own, police department and you contracted with Vermont State Police for, investigating any laws being broken, that then had been taken over by Fish and Wildlife when they were asked to help out because of the shortages in the Vermont State Police force. So those are the cases where Fish and Wildlife need to be doing the investigation. Animal control obviously still has a role in, taking calls from folks and sort of initial questioning to determine, is there actually even a violation of a state statute? I mean, a barking dog is a town ordinance issue. Animal control would handle that. It's not a violation of a state statute. And so I know that some animal control officers are still working closely with law enforcement to help them and assist them, but they actually don't have the authority to investigate a crime.
Thank you.
And I'll just go back to the point you were making earlier about the efficiency and the hope anyway, that ultimately, once the director is in place and begins mapping out what the future might look like, it won't necessarily involve a large investment anyway, but will better plan and consolidate the work that's spread across the Fish and Wildlife, the state police, the ag agency, I think in some cases as well.
Yes.
To everyone's benefit.
Yes, that would be the goal, is to streamline this, to get it consistent and fair, and have it be, efficient and getting sort of the buck stops here. There's one place that it all gets brought to, type of thing.
So just, I mean, for the committee's sake, there isn't any legislation in front of us now, and I don't know of any that's being introduced this session. Nobody's mentioned it to me. The bill that was originally introduced last year was pretty ambitious and was eventually just reduced to creating this position, creating a new division, but creating a director who then would do the work and make further recommendations, which would require, I think, legislation ultimately. But that would probably not be until until next session.
Yeah, I think you have a tight timeline. Once the new director is seated, the act calls for a report to go to the legislature in 8 months. They have to submit the report. Of course, the timing then of when they actually are seated will determine when you get that report. I do know there will be the ACIAB and the VHF and other organizations will be, all meeting with the new director, giving our recommendations and suggestions, and be ready to put some legislation out there, because just having a director in that division is not going to change anything about the way things are being done right now, for helping the animals. So that's why it was such an ambitious bill, is that we do feel very strongly that we've got to address these certain situations to be able to change the way animal cruelty is investigated.
Right. Representative O'Brien.
Eric, I don't know if you would know this, but at the moment, are there different, say, streams of investigation for livestock, like say a farm following the RAPS? I know dairy has some of their own regulations, but you've got livestock and then the sort of pet division and then even wildlife to some extent. And so in the future, you foresee this animal welfare position and that division really being the one-stop shop for all animal cruelty investigations?
Well, I don't think that Fish and Wildlife has any thought or plans to be brought under the umbrella of the Division of Animal Welfare. They have a very, very different mission, and though the game wardens are doing an amazing job trying to cover the reports of domestic animal cruelty cases, that's not what their department is meant to do. But they're law enforcement officers, so they are actually trained and able to do it. And they've been doing a great job. They don't necessarily have the knowledge about livestock and pets. That's what will be under, the Division of Animal Welfare as sort of the vision that the ACIAB has and the VHF. Right now, if there's a complaint regarding livestock, that is so, if it's in a town that does not have their own police department, that is investigated by Fish and Wildlife. They will reach out and consult with the Department of Ag, and certainly get guidance when you're talking about understanding what is, acceptable practices, because, I was an animal control officer for many years in Middlesex and Worcester, and I would take calls from people, who don't understand that sheep, can live outdoors with minimal shelter, even in the heat, that they're not, dying of heat. So, understanding what each species can tolerate and what is acceptable practices. The Department of Ag is tapped for a lot of information on that. And then for domestic pets, often the game wardens are reaching out to humane societies or some local rescues and asking them for animal care guidance. That's one of the reasons that it got talked about. We need standards for rescues and shelters, because there's no way for them to know if a shelter that they're talking to, or more likely a rescue, is actually following any standards of protocols themselves. And so, in fact, some of these rescues are being investigated for animal cruelty. So that's why there needs to be these supports put in place for the law enforcement so that they know who they can actually turn to and get good advice from regarding conditions of animals and standards.
Any other question? All right. Well, Erica, thank you for the work that you do. We're pleased to have been able to get the report and hear from you about it. I don't know whether the other committees that received the report will also be hearing from you or not. Maybe not immediately, but at some point during the session. But in any case, thank you on behalf of all of us.
Oh, well, and thank you for inviting me to come and speak with you and answer any questions that you have. I know you guys have an awful lot on your plate and crossover date is coming up. So I appreciate that you squeezed me in to hear about this, and we're happy to talk about it anytime.
Great, thank you.
And thank you all for the work that you're doing. Appreciate your service.
Right, take care.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Right, we can wrap up.